CEO fired me for being too old after 8 years. The meetings I secretly recorded. My name is Lawrence Morgan. For 8 years, I was the executive assistant to James Whitfield, CEO of Prominence Capital Partners, until 3 weeks ago, when he decided I was too old for the job. I still remember my first day at Prominence. The company occupied just half a floor in a mid-tier office building back then. James was ambitious, charismatic, and seemed to value loyalty above all else. "Lawrence," he told me during my interview, "I need someone who can anticipate what I need before I know I need it." For 8 years, that's exactly what I did. I was the first one in the office every morning, preparing his schedule, briefing him on meetings, remembering the names of his clients' spouses and children. I was the last to leave, making sure everything was set for the next day. As Prominence grew from a boutique investment firm to a powerhouse managing billions, I grew with it. Or so I thought. The signs started small. James began excluding me from meetings I'd always attended. My suggestions about his calendar were dismissed. Then came the sidelong glances from younger employees when I struggled with the newest app the company had adopted. Not because I couldn't learn it, but because no one had bothered to inform me it was being implemented. Then came that Monday morning. "Lawrence, we're making some changes to the executive floor," James said, not even looking up from his phone as I stood in his office. Sarah from HR sat there with a folder, her face professionally blank. The sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows cast a harsh glare on the mahogany desk that separated us. "What kind of changes?" I asked, though I already knew. The whispers had been circulating, the way James had been excluding me from meetings I'd always attended, the way he'd stopped asking for my input on his schedule, the sudden appearance of younger staff hovering around his office. "We're bringing in some fresh talent, someone who can better represent the modern image of Prominence." He finally looked up, his eyes cold. Nothing like the man who had once invited me to his daughter's graduation. "Sarah has your severance package, 2 months' salary. Very generous considering." "Considering what?" I managed to keep my voice steady, though I could feel a slight tremor in my hands. 8 years of service dismissed in under 3 minutes. "Considering we could bring in someone at entry level for half your salary." He smiled like he was doing me a favor. "Someone more digitally native." There it was. I was 52, not 92. I'd managed his entire digital presence, his CRM system, and implemented the company's first cloud-based executive calendar. I taught myself every new system the company adopted. I had stayed up countless nights learning software that would make our operations more efficient. But apparently, that wasn't enough. What he wanted wasn't skill. It was youth. "I see," I said, taking the folder from Sarah. The leather portfolio felt unusually heavy in my hands. "When is my last day?" "Today," said Sarah, not meeting my eyes. Her fingers nervously twisted the pearl necklace she always wore. "Ryan starts tomorrow." Ryan. I'd met him during his office tour last week. 25, fresh out of college, no executive experience. But he had youth, a social media following, and apparently, that was what mattered now. I'd seen him taking selfies in front of the company logo. That should have been my warning. I nodded, keeping my face neutral as I'd done through countless difficult meetings with difficult clients. Years of practice hiding my reactions while James berated vendors or manipulated negotiations had prepared me well for this moment. "I'll clear my desk." James was already back on his phone, thumb scrolling rapidly. "Sarah will escort you. Standard protocol." That's how it ended. 8 years of loyalty, of working weekends, of knowing his children's birthdays when he forgot, of covering for his mistakes, of being the steady hand when his temper flared, ended with standard protocol. I walked back to my desk, past curious eyes that quickly averted when I looked their way. Emily from accounting mouthed, "I'm sorry," as I passed. Derek from legal shook his head slightly. He'd warned me this was coming last month when they'd pushed out Barbara, the 49-year-old head of investor relations. I packed my things into a cardboard box while Sarah stood by the door, checking her watch occasionally. Pictures of my son and daughter from their college graduations. The small jade plant I'd kept alive since my first day. A gift from my wife Kate, who'd told me, "Something green to remind you of home when work gets too sterile." The engraved pen James had given me after I helped navigate a particularly difficult merger, inscribed with the backbone of prominence. The irony wasn't lost on me. As I reached for the framed photo of our executive team from last year's retreat, my hand trembled. The frame slipped, crashing to the floor, glass shattering across the polished hardwood. In the photo, I stood right beside James, both of us smiling against the backdrop of a Montana sunset. What a joke. "I'll get someone to clean that up," Sarah murmured, already reaching for her phone. "Don't bother," I said, leaving the broken frame on the floor. "It's not my job anymore." The elevator ride down was silent. Sarah kept her eyes fixed on the changing floor numbers. I held myself together, chin up, back straight, professional to the end. 3 junior analysts entered on the 14th floor, their animated conversation dying immediately when they saw me standing there with my box of belongings. The company Grapevine worked efficiently. It wasn't until I reached my car in the parking garage that I let the emotions come. Not tears. I'd been trained too well for that through years in a corporate culture that equated emotion with weakness. Instead, a cold, hard anger washed over me, making my hands shake on the steering wheel as I drove home. 15 years until retirement? And now what? Start over? Compete with people half my age for positions with half the responsibility and compensation? My wife Kate found me sitting at our kitchen table, staring at nothing, my box of belongings untouched beside me. She'd worked from home that day, a blessing in disguise. "They did it, didn't they?" she asked softly, her hand gentle on my shoulder. Kate had seen this coming. She'd noticed how I'd stopped talking about work with the same enthusiasm, how James had forgotten to invite us to the holiday party last year after 7 years of attendance. I nodded, reaching for her hand. Replaced by someone half my age who'll probably let him get away with twice as much. Kate sat beside me, her eyes always my anchor, steady and understanding. "What will you do?" I straightened my shoulders, feeling something harden inside me. Not defeat, resolve. "First, I'm going to open that bottle of Macallan we've been saving. Then, I'm going to make a plan." We stayed up late that night, Kate and I, discussing options. Apply for similar positions? Difficult at my age, despite my experience. Start a business? Possible, but risky without capital. Take the severance and keep looking? Not sustainable long-term. "Maybe this is an opportunity," Kate suggested as we moved to the living room, the whiskey warming my chest. "You've always talked about how toxic that place was becoming. Maybe this is your chance to find something better." "Maybe," I said, though a different kind of plan was already forming in my mind. Later that night, after Kate had gone to bed, I went to my home office and unlocked the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. Inside was a collection of small digital voice recorders, flash drives, and carefully labeled files. 8 years worth of insurance. You see, when you're just an assistant, people forget you're in the room. They speak freely, as if you're furniture. And James Whitfield had said plenty over the years that he wouldn't want anyone else to hear. It started 3 years into my tenure at Prominence. I'd been arranging documents for a board meeting when I overheard James on the phone, instructing our accounting department to massage some numbers before they went to the investors. Nothing illegal, not quite, but certainly unethical. That was the day I bought my first recorder. I hadn't planned to use any of it. It was just protection, insurance. But now it was leverage. I plugged in one of the flash drives and clicked through the files. There it was, James instructing our CFO to adjust the quarterly numbers before the shareholder meeting. "No one reads the footnotes anyway," he'd laughed. Another file, James discussing how to hide certain assets during his divorce. "My wife's lawyer is good, but not good enough to find the Cayman account," he'd boasted to our legal counsel, who had nervously suggested he might want to speak with a private attorney about such matters. And my personal favorite, James admitting the company's biggest product launch was based on technology they had essentially stolen from a smaller competitor. "They'll never be able to afford the lawyers to fight us," he'd said dismissively. "Besides, by the time it gets to court, if it ever does, we'll have evolved the platform enough to claim it as our own innovation." All of it recorded, dated, and backed up in triplicate. Some might call it paranoid. I called it prudent. For the next week, I did nothing obvious. I updated my resume, took long walks in the park, and waited. I bought a new suit, charcoal gray, impeccably tailored. "What's this for?" Kate asked when I brought it home. "Interviews?" "Something like that," I replied. I knew exactly what would happen at Prominence. The chaotic transition, the gaps in institutional knowledge, the relationships with clients that couldn't be transferred in a one-day handover, the little details about how James liked things done that Ryan wouldn't know, because James himself didn't know how much I did to make his life run smoothly. Ryan lasted 9 days. My former colleague Michael called me on day 10. "Lawrence, it's a disaster," he whispered into the phone, the sound of office chaos audible in the background. "Ryan missed a crucial meeting, scheduled James in Phoenix when he was supposed to be in Miami, and accidentally CC'd our biggest competitor on an internal strategy email. The Lockman account, you know, the one worth 9 figures that you've babied for years, they're threatening to pull out because no one remembered that Mr. Lockman is deathly allergic to shellfish. And guess what they served at the lunch meeting yesterday?" I made sympathetic noises while smiling into my whiskey. "That sounds challenging." "Challenging? It's a nightmare. James is on the warpath. He fired Ryan this morning, right there in the middle of the office, full meltdown, screaming about incompetence. He keeps saying Lawrence would never have let this happen." "That's unfortunate," I said, trying to sound sincere while a warm satisfaction spread through me. Not because Ryan had failed, the poor kid had been set up to fail, but because James was reaping what he'd sown. "They're bringing in a temp while they search for someone more experienced," Michael continued, lowering his voice further. "Everyone's saying he should just call you and beg you to come back, but you know James and his ego." "That would be awkward, wouldn't it?" I mused. "Considering I'm too old to represent the company's modern image. Not digitally native enough, I believe, was the concern." Michael's uncomfortable silence told me everything I needed to know about what had been said about my departure. "I should go," he said finally. "Just thought you should know. People miss you around here. It's not the same." 2 days later, the call came. Not from James, he'd never admit his mistake, but from Sarah in HR. "Lawrence," she said when I picked up, her voice overly professional. "I hope you're doing well." "Never better," I replied, which wasn't entirely a lie. There was something liberating about having nothing left to lose. "That's good to hear. I'm calling because we'd like to discuss the possibility of you returning to your position," she continued. "With some adjustments to your compensation package, of course." "Of course," I echoed, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. "Unfortunately, I've been giving my future some thought, and I don't believe prominence is the right environment for me anymore." Silence on the line. This wasn't the script she expected. I could almost see her shuffling papers nervously, looking for the talking points prepared for my eager acceptance. "Perhaps we could arrange a meeting with James to discuss." "That won't be necessary," I interrupted, my voice cool and controlled. "In fact, I've been meaning to reach out. There are some inconsistencies I noticed in my final paycheck and severance. I'm considering consulting with an employment attorney about age discrimination." Another long pause. I could hear her breathing quicken. "I'm sure we can resolve any discrepancies without involving attorneys," Sarah said, her voice tight. "I'll have payroll review your file immediately." "That would be appreciated. And Sarah, you might want to review the recordings of my exit interview. I believe there were some concerning statements made about my age and technological capabilities." "Recordings?" Her voice jumped an octave. "What recordings?" "Yes, I always recorded our meetings. For accuracy, you understand. James knew this. It was our standard protocol." It wasn't. But James wouldn't remember either way. And the panic in Sarah's voice told me everything I needed to know. I'll look into that right away," she stammered, before quickly ending the call. That evening, I received an email from Prominence's legal department. They were offering an enhanced severance package, 6-month salary, extended benefits, and a letter of recommendation. All I had to do was sign an NDA and release any claims against the company. I didn't respond. Instead, I spent the weekend carefully reviewing my recordings. I had over 200 files, each meticulously labeled and dated. I needed to be strategic, not vindictive, just effectively defensive. I selected 3 specific meetings. Nothing that would implicate me as complicit, but enough to show James's true character. The bonus-fixing conversation. The sexual harassment of a young analyst that was covered up with a settlement, an NDA. And my personal favorite, James explicitly stating they needed to get rid of anyone over 50 because they cost too much and think they know everything. Monday morning, I sent those 3 recordings to 2 people. Bernard Lowell, the chairman of Prominence's board, and Elizabeth Chen, our largest investor. I included no message, no demands, just the raw, unedited files with dates and locations. Then I waited. The response was swift and merciless. By Wednesday, James was taking a leave of absence pending an internal investigation. The official announcement cited personal reasons, but the company-wide email came directly from Bernard Lowell, unprecedented in Prominence's hierarchy. By Friday, the stock had dropped 17% as rumors swirled about financial improprieties. CNBC ran a segment on leadership issues at Prominence. The Wall Street Journal was asking questions about the company's last quarterly report. The following Monday, James was officially stepping down to pursue other opportunities. The press release was terse, the language carefully crafted by a crisis management team that had been working overtime. That same day, I received a call from Bernard Lowell himself. "Mr. Morgan," he said, his voice grave, I believe we have much to discuss. Would you be available to meet tomorrow? Of course, Mr. Lowell, I replied. I'm always happy to help Prominence in any way I can. We met at his private club downtown. Oak panels, leather chairs, the smell of money and power. Bernard, in his 70s and sharp as ever, got straight to the point. Those recordings, he said after we'd ordered coffee. There are more, I assume? I nodded. Many more. He studied me carefully. What do you want, Lawrence? Your job back? Money? Revenge? I considered the question seriously. Respect, I said finally, and acknowledgement that what happened to me, what's happened to others, was wrong. The result was better than I could have imagined. Prominence settled my age discrimination claim for an undisclosed amount, substantial enough that Kate and I could pay off our mortgage and set aside funds for our future grandchildren's education. They implemented a company-wide diversity and inclusion program that specifically addressed ageism, and James? His reputation was in tatters. No golden parachute, no soft landing at another firm. Actions meet consequences. I didn't take my job back. Instead, I started my own executive consulting firm, specializing in corporate ethics and executive support services. My first client, Elizabeth Chen, who was impressed by my attention to detail and commitment to transparency. We need more people who understand that ethics aren't optional, she told me during our first meeting. And frankly, I need someone I can trust to oversee the reorganization at Prominence. My business cards now say, Lawrence Morgan, founder and CEO. Not bad for someone too old to be an assistant. Within 6 months, I had 4 employees and a client list that included 3 Fortune 500 companies. Turns out, experience actually does count for something. And my reputation for integrity and for having the receipts to back it up preceded me in the best possible way. The most satisfying moment came 3 months after James's departure. I was meeting with a potential client in the same upscale coffee shop where James and I had often stopped for his morning espresso. As I waited, explaining my company's approach to ethical corporate governance, the door opened. James walked in. He looked older, tired, his designer suit replaced by business casual attire that didn't quite fit his frame. His confident stride was gone, replaced by the hesitant walk of a man who no longer assumed rooms would part for him. Our eyes met across the polished tables and designer light fixtures. He froze, then quickly looked away, hurrying to the counter. I didn't look away. I watched him, letting him feel my gaze. When he glanced back, I smiled and raised my cup in a small toast. He left without ordering, practically running from the shop. "Friend of yours?" my potential client asked. "Former colleague," I replied. We had a professional disagreement. I signed the contract with that client the next day. I learned 3 important lessons from my time at Prominence. First, your worth isn't determined by your age or title, but by your knowledge and integrity. The world tries to tell us we're obsolete after a certain age, but experience isn't obsolete. It's invaluable. Second, always keep receipts. Document everything, not for revenge, but for protection. In a world where loyalty is often one-directional, your best defense is the truth, carefully preserved. And third, the people who think you're invisible are the ones who never see you coming. The assistant taking notes in the corner, the older employee they assume is just counting days to retirement. These are the people who know where all the bodies are buried because they were trusted to dig the graves. As for those recordings I didn't send, they're still safely stored away. Insurance for a rainy day. Because while I believe in second chances, I also believe in being prepared. After all, I may be too old for some things, but I'm just the right age for wisdom. And wisdom tells me that the best revenge isn't just success. It's success with integrity, built on the ruins of someone else's mistakes.